Yeah, well, thank you, James, for having us on the show today. I'm bringing Lloyd. Ethan Williams. I run a consulting business called Lloyd Consulting. I'm a local Philadelphia theater performer, advisor, and teacher. Yeah, that's about, that's about all I'll say about myself right now. I think you mean Bobby, right?
My name is Bobby Evans. I live in West Grove, Pennsylvania, 50 miles outside of Philly.
Sure. Um, so when you say improv to most people, what comes to mind is um, an improvised theatrical stage performance that's really comic. If you've seen Whose Line Is It Anyway on television, or if you've ever been to comedy sports, that's short form improvisation. It's really great when it's done well. It can be cringeworthy when it's not done so well. But it's I'm not drawing any sort of like qualitative distinction between the two forms at all. Short form is about clever ideas and really fast, bold choices and comic, comic inspiration. Long form, on the other hand, is theatrical improvisation, which is more interested in deep relationships and in co-creating a story that takes place over time. So a nice way to think about long form improvisation is that a couple of actors or a group of actors are co-creating really a short play on stage using sort of minimal audience participation, whereas short form uses an enormous amount of audience suggestion. Long form tends to use just a little bit of audience suggestion. So it's really about the two performers connecting, saying yes and to each other, and building a story that has several chapters.
Awesome. How has this worked out for you? How does this work out during the show? Bobby, you use a audio interface device to speak. How does this work with long form improvisation?
It's easy.
Awesome. Um, so what could you give me an example of what it is that you guys improvise during the show, or how do you approach this?
Um, let's see. At our last rehearsal, I'm trying to remember, Bobby. Oh, one, sh- one. So we create two stories that evolve side by side, and they each have three scenes, and the scenes alternate. And in an ideal world, somehow towards the end of the show, the two stories are relating or informing each other in some way. But that doesn't always happen. So help me out here, Bobby. We ran a two-man submarine in one of the stories, and Bobby was the captain, and he was trying to spy on his ex-wife using the periscope off the coast of the
Yes.
Jersey Shore. What was the other one, Bobby? Do you remember?
Go.
Was it the one about? See, here's the thing. Here's what happens. Bobby and I invent brand new stories every time we meet,
Hmm.
and so it's actually just really hard to keep them sorted in my head. And that's one of the beautiful things about improvisation is it puts you directly in the moment with each other.
Right.
And then when it's over, unless you really spend time trying to like hold on to it, it kind of drifts away.
Yeah. Um, that. it's actually kind of interesting. The idea of kind of the ephemeralness of the art form, just not being able to hold on to it. I mean, like, I'm just thinking of all the shows that we've recorded. You know, like I couldn't tell you exactly what happened every show, or every episode of this show, because it is sort of that improvisation. You're
Me
just
too.
talking off the top of your head. Um, but of course we record it here. So, what do you find kind of the long term impact then? How do you maintain a long term impact with the show, or what would be what do you think the long term impact of the show is?
Do you mean on audiences?
Yeah, audiences, or in general, like a lot of the thing that artists tend to do is impact the world, with their shows. um I just wonder, in a like, I don't know. Your earlier example of whose line is it anyway? Is not necessarily impactful long term, but there's recorded, like, again, there's recordings of it. I'm probably assuming something here, but in the world of presenting this during the Fringe, you're presenting it to X number of audience members, and where what would you see as the kind of impact of that? Where do you try to take audiences, or how do you try to impact audiences with that performance?
Well, I would love to hear what Bobby has to say to this. Let me just name the obvious here, right? Bobby is an unusual person to see in an improv show. And so, even though we're not underlining at all Bobby's condition, like, hey, come see somebody who has cerebral palsy in an improv show, we're just like, no, this is Ben and Bobby, and we're making shit up together, and we're having a great time, and we encourage you to come and enjoy it with us. It's unavoidable that, to some extent, the impact has to do with um, asking the question, who is allowed to be on stage and who isn't? And in what ways are we limiting ourselves by not exploring the ways in which people with disabilities can participate with us creatively? I improvise with Bobby because he's great and hilarious and has amazing ideas. But I'm also trying to say, and again, I don't want to speak for Bobby. This is something that people without disabilities have to be very careful about. But I also just want to point out that there are a whole bunch of different kinds of people in the world, and each of them have extraordinary creative gifts, and we should be making space for them on our stages. So, Bobby, do you have anything you want to add?
I wanted to get into acting because I like doing it.
um when acting, do you find that folks treat you differently, in an acting environment, than in daily life?
Yes,
What would you say the biggest difference is? Um, while you're formulating a response, I hope you don't mind me just mentioning one thing that's interesting that I just thought of that's a kind of limiting factor. Um, so YouTube videos, the algorithm detects how long there's silence in your video and will affect your ranking by percentage of silence in your video, um, percentage of lack of audio or speaking or anything like that, which I find interesting. We're holding space for Bobby to respond, but that like it's just interesting that's going to affect the reach of this video, regardless of whether it should be or not.
I can be me for 2 hours, not take care of business.
That is that's an interesting yeah, when you can be yourself while acting, and yeah, you can be yourself. The show is you're running for 2 hours. No.
No, it's about 30 to 40 minutes.
Oh, but the whole like rehearsal is, the whole time period is being yourself for 2 hours. Um,
Yes,
got it. Um, so you have shows on the September 22nd and 23rd at 8 p.m. You're in the, excuse me, the Pig Iron building, or where are the shows?
Yeah, they're in Studio B at the Pig Iron School, which is on Second Street in Northern Liberties. I don't can't remember the cross streets, so I'm not even going to try. But if you go to Philly Fringe and just search for the keyword Bobby, our show will come up, and there's a link with a map, and they make it pretty easy to find us. Friday night is a pay what you can show, and Saturday night is $20 a ticket.
it's
So come Friday.
Jefferson and second.
Oh, there you go. Jefferson in second. Thanks, Bobby. Um, can I just want to reflect on something, James, that you were just talking about with YouTube. One of the things that I've discovered as a performer working with Bobby is is how to fill the space, right? When Bobby's typing. So a lot of what I do as an improviser is what's called an improv speak, object work, which is miming, right? So I try to create situations or characters where I'm cleaning something and I'm talking to Bobby over my shoulder. So I don't necessarily need to sort of stand there and watch him while he types, unless that's a creative choice that he and I are making together. But sort of on a deeper level, what Bobby has been offering me is an extraordinary opportunity to pause and to listen more deeply, and to breathe. Improv is generally like fast, fast, fast.
Mm-hmm.
So it's completely counter improv to work with a partner where you need to pause and breathe before you hear what he has to say. And that's been challenging, but also an extraordinary gift.
It's
It is fast.
yeah.
You feel like it? You feel like it's fast, Bobby?
I feel like any performance always kind of speeds up the pace. Um and also I do want to say like even as we get into like the topics of the day, feel free to formulate responses while anybody else is talking, and just jump in whenever you have the moment. And that's to both of you. I like to just have conversations where people jump in. So don't be afraid to just jump into the middle of when somebody else is talking. It's cool. I
So I've learned Bobby's ready to talk gesture, which is his left index finger kind of hovers over his keyboard.
uh-huh.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Bobby, but when I see Bobby do that, I'm like, okay, he's got something he wants to say, so I'm going to shut up now.
Yes.
I can't see that, but but I'll rely
Okay.
on you. And that's kind of the improv of interviewing. I tend to have to fill the space, like you were saying, like fill the spaces when my interview subjects are thinking or don't really have an opinion on a topic or what have you, by just constantly talking. And it's this is getting kind of meta, but like I reflexively fill the space, and then I feel bad if I'm like talking over my interview subjects, because it feels like I'm not holding space for them. But then there's kind of also a give and take to that process. You have to I have to fill the space so that the audience is engaged, but give you time to formulate your response, or type what you want to say, or figure out how you want to say what you want to say. And yeah, so it's interesting because I've had interview subjects that completely understand that, or like that's their conversational style normally. And I've had interview subjects that will actually do that in reverse. Especially politicians tend to do that in reverse. They'll fill the space until you like interject and like kind of get a point in there. And so it sounds interestingly similar to the improv process. When you're just two people on stage, you're kind of filling the space for each other, but also holding on to the audience attention, etc. And like making that work. I imagine that's been a really interesting part of this process.
Yeah. Um, Trusting that um, what Bobby and I create can contain silence, and that the silence can be full, um, and mysterious, and maybe even a little confusing, and that's okay too. Avoiding the sense that I need to fill the space up with noise, um, and just trusting like Bobby and I are creating something together, and it's going to go where it's going to go, and there's no wrong answers.
That's got to be super counterintuitive, as a performer, not filling every moment. Um,
Well, it's the number one improv mistake, if you ask me, is filling the silence with language just because there's silence. It's like one of the number one ways we stop listening to each other on stage.
um,
We
inter-
were working over the summer to make this happen.
yeah. Has it been a longer process because of like kind of learning new lessons in improv, learning new lessons in how to work in this environment? Or would you say the process has been relatively compact?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, yeah. Well, both of you.
Um, So I've sort of worn two hats during this process. I was Bobby's teacher in a improv acting class. That's how we met. And so I continue to wear that hat, and I continue to coach Bobby just sort of on improv best practices and stuff like that. And then I put on my other hat, which is I'm Bobby's partner on stage, and that can be challenging sometimes. Um, we've met twice a week for in chunks. So we had a big break between the middle of July and the middle of August because we were both traveling. Um, but I mean, I think Bobby and I could do the show tomorrow and we'd be fine. Really, now it's about just getting used to each other and getting some test audiences in. That's the other thing too. Is like beginning to just deal with the nerviness of being witnessed. That's an important piece. What do you think, Bobby?
We can do the show tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely already kind of a methodology and so in interviewing we call it rapport. Building rapport with your interview subject is always important in interviewing, and I suppose there's a bit of rapport in improv, but I building that rapport is probably just as important in improv, but you don't usually, I would guess, have to do it as quickly, um, and build that kind of methodology and back and forth and flow to your conversation. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, the improv,
go ahead.
the performance relationship in improv is based in trust. And so part of what we do when we get together to practice is we're just building trust with each other. Like I can give you any offer, or I can screw up your name or make a mistake, and you're going to be there for me.
Hmm.
One of the big improv phrases is "I got your back." And there's a whole sort of game we play sometimes with groups of people where you say someone's name, James, I got your back. And then you say, Bobby, I got your back. And it's this whole way in which the improv relationship is this extraordinary experience of mutual trust. And that's what Bobby and I are doing together. Is just learning to really trust each other.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting in an interview. You don't always have the ability to build trust because you're sometimes interviewing what is kind of like a hostile or counter of your opinion person. Um, and I suppose that one of the interesting things you brought up is the kind of how we start to get to the point on stage where we don't listen to each other um, as individuals, and I think that's also kind of interesting that as social media increases, as the use of social media increases, as individuals become personalities on a smaller and smaller scale, um, that there is this element of taking up the silence. Like people publishing things kind of somewhat unnecessarily. I don't know. I don't know how to put it. It's because so just roughly translating transitioning into freedom of speech. Like we've always had this concept in our politics, in our society, of freedom of speech. Anybody can say anything, um, and that comes with consequences. But for most of our history, we haven't had a quick line to that freedom of speech. Like at least not on the massive level that we do now. Like I can turn on a camera on my computer and talk to 3,000 people, um, with very little trouble. Like, I don't have to sell 3,000 tickets to my show, or get 3,000 people to come to a a city park, or somehow massively organize a movement of people. I only have to talk, and then people will then therefore watch it. Um, and because of that, there seems to be a lot of opinion, published anymore, and it gets to the point where people aren't really listening to each other at all. They're just talking, and filling the space. Um, I think your show might be interesting from the perspective of how do we back down from that. In improv, you're filling the space because you're engaging the audience, um, and you're kind of backing away from that necessity of constant engagement with holding space for communication. How might we translate that into a wider thought of holding space to actually communicate? I find, this is where I find like the intersection between art and politics kind of really interesting, and then we start talking politics, and um um at any rate, the I think that is an interesting impact of your show, if it can be, that hopefully it will be, that we start to discover that we need to hold a little bit more empty space for the communication, for the thought, and the ability to hear each other out.
Bobby, wasn't one of the original titles of our show, um, let me see if I get this right. How do you speak when you can't speak?
Yes,
I'd be really interested to hear what freedom of speech means to you, Bobby. I mean, in some ways, that's a subtext of what we're doing is, um, whose voices are we hearing? Whose voices are we making space for? You know,
Yeah, is a siren.
it's my right to what I want to say.
and do you feel like this show, it like that's a is that an important part of what you and I are creating together? Do you feel?
Yes,
I really I like that. I think it's important. Um, So the day's topics, all the things that are subheadings on the show today, they're all about freedom of speech. They're the more traditional freedom of speech, and I apologize for being so um, uh, glitchy with how I speak today. I'm trying to be carefully considered, and sometimes when I'm more carefully considered, my thoughts don't come out as fluidly as when I'm talking about something that I'm not really thinking about. It's interesting. But at any rate, 2 weeks ago, Marion County Record is a small town newspaper in Marion County. And the Marion County Record was raided, for lack of better term, but I think that is actually an accurate term in this case, by the Marion County Police Department. The Marion County Police Department, as is true of the paper as well, is a relatively small organization. There are four officers in the Marion County PD. There are only like four reporters on the Marion County Record who work regularly there. Two of whom, one of whom is the publisher. And the Marion County Police Department raided the house of the publisher, who lived with the co-publisher, who was his mom. His mom was 96 years old, I believe, if I recall correctly. And she unfortunately passed away in part due to the stress of having her home raided and all of her equipment taken. They took all of their internet and computer equipment from the house. Um, they did the same at the newspaper. They took all the computers and internet equipment that they could find. And they did the same thing at the houses of the reporters for the paper. They engineered this to be a simultaneous raid, so they got the participation of some other police departments. Um, and you might ask, what's up with that? Why would, like, are they drug traffickers? Are they criminals of some type? What's going on? Well, it turns out the Marion County Record had received unsolicited a a copy of a restaurateur's driving record, which indicated that the restaurateur had a DUI and continued to drive after getting that DUI. Um, and that restaurateur was in the midst of applying for a state liquor license. And the restaurateur dislikes the paper for some reason. Dislikes the publisher. And in an incident of personal politics, asked that the newspaper and the publisher be and the reporter and the publisher be removed from a public meeting that the restaurateur had with a state lawmaker in support of the state lawmaker's campaign. So all this gets very convoluted very quickly. I find it fascinating how quickly local politics gets convoluted. But at any rate, so the judge in the case issued what is deemed by most legal theorists an illegal warrant, um, and sent the police department to go confiscate all this stuff. Um, that's problematic for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the Constitution of the United States. But even if if we thought that this was a good idea, um, why would you raid a news organization, um, and stop their, like, specifically seize their computers and such that they can't speak any longer? And wouldn't you think that would have dire consequences? Um, like, this, would be, I suppose, somewhat equivalent to, I mean, even the if somebody came and took Bobby's audio interface, it would be way worse. But it is similar in the chilling of the freedom of speech, because if, say, This is like if, if somebody gave you guys a report, and one of you guys a report, and they came and took every piece of equipment that you guys both had. um I wonder how you think you would react to that. Like if somebody came and took your equipment, like the day before your show. um do you think that you'd still be able to have speech, and would it stop you or slow you or intimidate you from speaking again on the same subjects?
Well, I mean, I think Bobby and I are in different situations. You know, um, again, I don't want to speak for Bobby, but I'll just state the obvious that technology is super important for him. So when you're talking about removing technology, that's a huge issue. For me, if you took away my lights and sound, I'd still do the show. I'd just find another. I'd do it outside somewhere. You know.
I have something to say that. Somebody took my house away. He says he owns my house. Mom, Dad are fighting to get my house back.
Yeah, Bobby's been sharing with me about this drama that's going on in his family, and um, it has a similar quality of the situation that you're bringing up, James, of an outside authority coming in and trying to take possession of something. Go ahead, Bobby.
That's my freedom of speech.
It's nice that you have the ability to speak on the issue, um, that's impacting you. But even still, like, our social structure doesn't make enough hold enough space for you to fully be able to defend yourself in that situation, which is problematic. You have your mom and dad helping you, which is wonderful. But we how do we move in a fast-paced world without and still hold space for everyone, regardless of what their ability level is.
I think part of that is we look for opportunities to engage with people of all abilities. Um, we look for opportunities to um, diversify our workplaces and our creative spaces. In some ways, this is a we're in a moment of um, increased awareness about around the idea of ability and disability. But it has a direct relationship to freedom of speech, direct relationship. Um, and part of what I try to be careful about, especially with Bobby, is not speak for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a disability phrase, "Nothing about us without us," and so I try to be mindful of that, and obviously because speech is so much easier for me than it is for him. It's easy for me to just keep talking, so I have to actually make myself say, "I'm going to stop talking, Bobby. What do you got?"
People did that. I didn't like that.
You didn't like it when people are like talking over you?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so from a non or from a an abled person perspective, I find the conversation interesting to throw the able person.
I feel angry when they do that.
Yeah, and I can understand that. And also, just to throw the other side of the perspective in there, I find it amazingly hard to just like you said, I'm in my brain right now. I'm running a check, constantly going, "Hey, have I been talking too long?" um, it's fascinating to try and um how much effort it takes to run that check, and kind of um moderate oneself. When
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm used to dominating with my voice.
Right.
I've been a teacher, I've been a facilitator. I'm used to actually like creating shared experiences with my voice. So I'm like conditioned to keep talking. And I think one of Bobby's great gifts is is forcing me to develop that awareness. Like, am I steamrolling?
Right.
You know,
Right.
I like Ben. Shut up. Just shut up and listen.
um I wanted to talk about Timothy Ryan. Timothy Ryan just won a $400,000 settlement from the city of Oakland. He sued the city of Oakland for violating his First Amendment rights, with excessive force while he was covering a 2020 Black Lives Matter protest for CBS Radio in Oakland, KCBS. Um, and There were a lot of instances during both the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd protests where people who were uh, both official and citizen journalists were assaulted by, stopped from recording, had their equipment stolen, were themselves physically attacked by the police. Um, Now, what police defenders will say is, well, it was a heated situation. They're not going to be able to tell the difference between a protester and a citizen journalist, etc., so on and so forth. Um, I don't know. Me personally, probably a little biased here because I am a journalist. I'm gonna say $400,000 isn't enough. The fine for something like this should be high enough that it basically puts the police department out of business. But how do we balance uh the need? I think it's an absolute need to allow a freedom of speech with the concerns of the general, general society at large. The police are there ostensibly to make sure that society still functions, even though there's folks with a strong opinion and protesting. How do we balance the need to let those people speak with the need for society to be able to still function? And I think this relates again to your show. It's an extreme example. How do we balance the need to let Bobby speak while still having a show? How has that exploration? How have you dealt with an exploration of that as you've rehearsed for this show?
Yeah, so doing a show with Bobby means it sort of automatically means um, the word I'm coming up with is doing countercultural or counterconventional improv. And so it forces me to think of improvisation in a different way, in a new way. Um, so I'm trying to relate this back to the example you just said, but um, I mean, what's interesting is it's new for me, but it's not new for Bobby,
Hmm.
right? This is he's just creating out of his own experience. Um, so a willingness to walk into a creative space that is uncomfortable because it's new and you feel like it's not the one that's supposed to happen, right? That has to be the willingness at the outset. And guess what? You discover that within that new experience, there's a ton of ways in which you can create, and also it's this enormous invitation for me to remind myself that I'm enough just being there and being connected and listening and doing something with my hands and telling a story, like that's enough.
Right,
I don't need
right.
to like fill the space with extra stuff. And so that's also a gift, I think, that I get from working with Bobby.
That's really cool.
It takes
Um,
time to get a show up runner, but it was fun.
Can you
I'm
say that one more time, buddy?
Yeah.
It takes time to get a show up runner, but it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really fascinated by this conversation and just recognizing the time. I know you guys need to go in a couple minutes. Um would love any last thoughts. Let's start with Bobby. Do you have any last thoughts? Any like big things to share with the audience? Any thoughts about things that you would like them to notice when they come to the show?
Yes. It's read our do not being your kids.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that one. I,
Sometimes I
It's read our do not take your kids.
oh, don't take your kids to the show.
oh, rated R.
It's rated R.
Yeah.
Don't take your kids. Or listen, if you swear around your kids, bring them. Yeah, yeah. We have fun.
Any last thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, just come with an open mind, and yeah. I mean, really, Bobby and I have fun together. We just want to share the fun that we have with an audience for a couple of nights, just making stuff up and seeing where it takes us. It's just that simple. So, happy to have like a conversation afterwards about, the other sort of big issues, or whatever. But that's really not the point for us. We're just making a show together.
No, but any show you create always touches on the big issues. I think
Sure.
that's kind of the point of my show is every show, every artist has big issues to that they contribute to the conversation on, whether they realize it or not.
I agree. I,
uh,
I I agree. I do.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm gonna take you guys off camera. I'm gonna go to a one up of me, and I really appreciate your time this morning. We got like 5 minutes left in the show. I'm gonna cover the last couple of topics on my own, and really appreciate you for being here today. Go see their show, everybody, and thank you again.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for having us today.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. The other cases that I touched on in the title, Tim Ryan, we just covered Tim Ryan versus the Oakland PD, Alyssa Azar and Heidi Cuda versus their respective legal folks that are attacking them. I find it fascinating that in today's media, in today's age of social media, people are getting attacked like this. These are, like, as far as the legal system is concerned, these are threats. They're actual threats to people, and people have and do and will continue to be arrested and prosecuted for this kind of thing. Um, Alyssa Azar was mentioned by James Bucknall, that's Andy No's lawyer, um, in a tweet, um, and mentioned in a negative, and saying that maybe it's time to bring back public whippings to put an end to this nonsense. Um, but you're saying that public whippings are going to stop a reporter from reporting on, um, a protest of a war monument. Like that doesn't work. That doesn't work for anyone. Mostly it doesn't work for, like actual public figures. You're not these are not things that you're supposed to say or do, and threatening a reporter is not a good idea. It's not a good idea ever before. It's not a good idea continuing going forward. Hopefully, like this kind of thing results in these large judgments that, that somebody broke the law, and so, they owe people money. Um, Heidi Cuda was covering um, George Floyd, and some of the other like right wing extremism, and the brother of General Mike Flynn, um, uh, Joseph Flynn, um, literally had bots with provocative names join Heidi Cuda's channels in succession as a threat. Um, you know, uh, names like "Bang Bang Bitch," "You're going to die," "Lock your doors." These aren't, these aren't like veiled threats. They're not things that people don't understand as threats. They're just threats. Um, so I wonder, when there will be consequences for this kind of thing. Um, at any rate, as I'm sure you hear in the background, my daughter would like a little bit of attention. Hi, Munchkin. Come here. And we're gonna wrap up today's show. We're gonna finish talking about freedom of speech, and we're gonna let the Munchkin hop in here. Um, and see herself on camera. See, that's you. Look, that's coming from there. At any rate, we will, hopefully, for this little one and for all the little ones out there, we can make the world a little bit better. We can allow more people freedom of speech, protect the freedoms of speech that we have, and protect the freedom of speech for those that don't always get to speak. You need your binky?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll go get your binky. Um, but yeah, thanks for tuning in this Wednesday. Tune in next Wednesday. We'll be back live. And we'll have more guests for you. We are still working on our yeah, we're still working on our guest for that week. But tune in next Wednesday, and we'll be live, and we'll share a new show with you. So have a great week, everybody.